Thank you very much for listening this morning. Thanks for your interest. I'm actually quite happy to be here. This is our first go at presenting at the Master Investor Showcase, so I hope you find the story interesting. I'm not interested in punishing you with PowerPoint slides. We're going to cover these at a relatively quick pace. Our CFO and I are both here all day. We've got a booth upstairs, so come and see us if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to tackle all of those. And without further ado, who is Eden Research? What do we do? Well, we're an AIM-listed company focused very much on the development of sustainable solutions for professional agriculture, also consumer product applications, and animal health. We do this using plant-derived chemistry and a delivery system that's formulated from a natural source, being yeast. About us a little bit, we're actually the only UK-listed company focused on sustainable pesticides for agriculture. There are a few other companies that work in the sustainability story. Some of you might be familiar with plant healthcare. Plant healthcare are very much focused on biostimulants, so we're partners in a program. If you're familiar with that business, we're doing the, let's say, the therapeutic side of things. They're very much more focused on plant rigor, plant health, etc., using some clever chemistry. Focusing very much on the crop protection market, which is the vast majority of our business today. I'll point out first, and I'll probably repeat myself a few times, we operate in a very highly regulated business. Right behind human therapeutics, crop protection is probably the most highly regulated use in the life sciences of life science molecules, chemistry, etc. So for us, regulation controls the pace with which we do absolutely everything. And with the orientation of our business, it's actually what is opening doors for us as we continue to develop our business and grow. Today, I'm very happy to say that we have 19 countries in which we have approval for one or both of our first two products. That number is going to change very, very soon as we continue to press forward with securing new regulatory authorizations. And the reason that's important is because when we think about the company's addressable market, that addressable market is very clearly defined by the regulatory clearance that we have. So it's not good enough to get approval to treat one disease on one crop in one country. If you have that, that is your addressable market. You have to go back to the regulators and say, you know, I want a broader list of crop targets, I want a broader range of diseases or insect pests that we're targeting. And of course, you have to do that in every country in which you want to operate. There really are no easy paths. With that said, whilst regulation controls what we do day in and day out, as I mentioned earlier, it's also what enables a great number of opportunities for us. And we've seen some new and very exciting opportunities put in front of us as a sole output of new regulatory action. And so for us, you know, the regulation defines what we do. It controls the pace with which we do what we do, but it also creates new and exciting opportunities for us. I'm very happy to say that today we have 66 different crop use approvals. So those are combinations of different crops and different disease and insect targets. And so this is the path that we're on today. And of course, underlying the business is a portfolio of 6 patent families and a comprehensive set of regulatory dossiers that support regulation across the world. I mentioned earlier that we also are active in consumer products and animal health. The vast majority of our business and the vast majority of our investment is in the crop protection sector. But I mentioned this very briefly to make a point. And the point is that in each of these major market areas, what we are doing is leveraging the same assets. So we are formulating the same active ingredients and using the same delivery technology to solve problems faced across consumer products, animal health, and crop protection. So in the one instance, we're treating a fungal pathogen on grapes, for example, to ensure the quality and the availability of the wine that you might have enjoyed last night. And on the other hand, we're formulating similar products to treat fungal pathogens that affect your dog. And again, same chemistry, all sustainable, all formulated using plastic-free delivery technology. So why is it, and we're going to focus very much from now on the crop protection business, what is it that's driving our business forward? I mentioned regulation earlier. Consumer sentiment around pesticide residues in food, in the wine that you enjoy, pretty much in all aspects of what you consume into your body has become an obsession. And I'll show you a slide in a minute, which wasn't very hard to create. Took me about 5 minutes. But the point is that as consumer sentiment around pesticide use increases, as the concern increases over time, regulators are motivated to make the marketplace safer and safer. And so it's these macro trends that are, as I said earlier, creating opportunities for us. Now, one might say, well, you just simply remove pesticides from the market. Surely that's the solution. Why are you concerned about sustainable approach to it? And that's not an answer. Here you note that the demand for food is going to increase by 50% from today by 2050, and some people think that that's an understatement. So growers need to produce more with the available resources they have available to them today. It's not good enough just to remove the pesticides. So the only solution really is to treat disease and insect pests in a sustainable manner, and that's what we're focused on doing. I mentioned a minute ago that I wanted to put up a slide just to illustrate for everyone what the drivers really look like in our day-to-day lives. Where do you see this manifesting itself? And you've probably all heard the story about neonicotinoids being removed from the market, which have a major impact on honeybees. This is a relatively new class of chemistry that is a very, very effective set of insecticides. Unfortunately, in some instances, they're a bit too effective, and as a consequence, they've had a known and very clearly demonstrable impact on pollinators as a whole. Again, it probably took me 5 minutes to put this slide together, and I mean, there were so many options to choose from, so it's nice to be able to illustrate that for people. Moving on, when we talk about the crop protection industry, earlier I mentioned the $58 billion market, which is the crop protection industry as a whole. We operate within today a segment called the biopesticide sector. This is the most rapidly growing, the most dynamic sector within our industry. And I would say that our estimates are that about 80 to 85% of all research and development money being spent today by fast growth companies is being spent in the area of sustainable solutions to crop protection. And very often that approach is dominated by the approach from biopesticides. Again, we see growth now post-COVID returning to about 15% per year, and I'm very happy to say we're growing at a reasonably faster pace than that. Speaking a little bit about our sales development, it's right to say that 2020 and 21 were somewhat challenging years for us. It's important to note that during the pandemic, sure, crops didn't stop growing, but farmers stopped harvesting certain crops. For example, as the demand for wine fell off, despite my best interest to keep it going. The long and short of it is that we are now returning to pre-COVID levels, and it's estimated that wine consumption by the on-premise and off-premise alike will return to pre-COVID levels this year or next year. So what are we doing exactly? Some of you who followed the story may be aware that about 3 years ago, we raised about £10.4 million from a series of 11 new institutional investors, one strategic investor, and then a good number of retail investors that came in as a part of an open offer. Since that time, we've been working very, very hard to accelerate the pace with which we are able to develop and register new products. Now, I know that the name is Eden Research. The truth of the matter is that about 95% of what we do in the laboratory is really development. It's leveraging the portfolio of chemistry that we have available to us and our formulation technology to bring new products to market or to expand the uses for existing products. And I'm happy to say that we've transitioned from a 95% outsourced development activity to a 95% in-house development activity, and what that does is it allows us to move the pace of innovation at a much, much greater rate. So our strategy is very much around business line diversification, continuing to develop in terms of research and development and optimizing our operations, driving our costs down and continuing to expand. And of course, growing and strengthening the team has been a key activity over the last 3 years as we've transitioned from an outsourced model to an in-house model. Commercial footprint, as I mentioned earlier, regulatory is so important to us. Effectively, what this is the landscape of countries in which we have authorization for one or both products. So these are the countries in which we operate. There's another map that illustrates the countries in which we have partners that are ready to go, distribution partners who are ready to go, awaiting product authorization. New Zealand is a very good example of that. And until recently, the United States was a very long awaited example of that as well. So we appointed distribution partners in the United States several years in advance of actually having regulatory approval there, so that when the regulatory approval has come across, we were able to hit the ground running, and we're in the process of doing that now. This is a good illustration of the progress that we've made in terms of regulatory clearances. And again, just harking back to the point I made a bit earlier, our addressable market is defined by the number of crops, the number of diseases, the number of pests, and the number of countries in which we can operate. And so, it's a very obvious one. I'm not a strategic genius. It made very, very clear sense to work very much on these areas of activity so that we could grow our addressable market as quickly as we could. So the first two products that we've launched, and I've made reference to them already. The first one is a product called Mevalone. It's a fungicide that initially targeted botrytis on grapes, and we've very successfully expanded the label to that to not just include grapes, but to also include apples and a whole range of additional horticultural crops. And critically, we've also expanded the label to not just target botrytis, but to target new and even much larger disease targets. To give you a really quick illustration of that, we're currently working with one of our partners, Corteva, in France, to grow the addressable market by about tenfold on the back of new regulatory clearance. So we're going to transition from a market that is really just botrytis on grapes and storage disease on apples to a market that is those plus new disease targets, which will ultimately translate into a tenfold growth in the overall addressable market in France, and we're busy doing the same thing elsewhere as well. This gives you some examples just to pull all of this together into what our products look like and what they do. These are some of the key attributes of those products. So key, again, is sustainably but effectively treating disease and pest problems that face professional growers. Our products are actually registered as residue-free, which means that farmers don't need to be concerned about residue audits by the likes of Tesco's, Marks and Spencer's, etc. Our products are also polymer-free, so if you followed the story at all about plastics or microplastics in your food, we're not contributing to the problem. It's not that well known, but a lot of crop protection formulations, as well as nutrition products for plants, actually intentionally include plastics. So while you see a farmer out there spraying the crops, what you don't realize is in addition to spraying pesticides, they're also putting down a considerable amount of polymer into the field, which can contribute to the accumulation of microplastics. The potential for growth for us is really almost unlimited. There are a great number of growing opportunities for us to approach things such as seed treatment, downy mildew, new crops such as cannabis, and even major crops that have some very significant problems such as potatoes with potato blight and potato cyst nematode. And these are all areas in which we have active development programs, both by ourselves and in conjunctions with partners such as Sipcam Oxen and Corteva, for example. I'm not going to belabor all of these points. These slides will be available on our website. And in fact, some content from here is already available on our website. And again, please come by and say hi to Alex and myself later in the day if you have questions. The point is that the total addressable for market for our first product, Mevalone, is substantial already, and we're rapidly approaching that current status, as you see here in the left-hand column. And as we move forward and we add new targets onto the label, you'll see that overall addressable market continue to grow. Our second product is called Cedros, and Cedros is a nematicide, and you'd probably be forgiven for not knowing what a nematicide is. I'll have to admit that prior to joining Eden, I wasn't that familiar with them myself. But basically, nematodes are little tiny parasitic parasites that affect a very, very wide range of crops, and they affect crop yield. So this is a huge overall target for us, and we're working very actively with Eastman Chemical to commercialize this product in 29 different countries around the world. This is the illustration that I mentioned a little bit earlier, where we're working with Corteva in France to grow the overall addressable market for Eden's product by just changing the target by adding 2 new crops to the overall label. And those two targets are basically downy mildew and powdery mildew. And as I mentioned earlier, there are some very substantial opportunities to further expand the portfolio. We've publicized the fact that we're working very closely with Corteva, who, if you're not familiar with Corteva, because I think even today it's not a household name, that's the combined agri-science business of DuPont and Dow. So when those 2 companies merge, they form Corteva, and Corteva's sole focus is basically crop inputs. So they are the #1 or #2 seed producer in the world through their Pioneer brand. They're the #1 or #2, or certainly in the top 5 crop protection chemical producer in the world. So they're a substantial partner. We're working very actively with them and another partner on the development of seed treatments to, again, expand our overall addressable market. Another good example here is the opportunity that we are focused on in the development of a new insecticide product. The insecticide targets a broad class of insect pests across a very broad range of crops. And here you see the overall potential for that market. Okay, and with that said, thank you very much.